Which players should you be targeting if you have a Dynasty contending team? We're talking about that and more on today's episode of Locked On Dynasty.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Matt Williamson and Ryan McDowell.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I'm your host, Ryan McDowell. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23. Joining me, as always, is former NFL scout Matt Williamson. Find Matt on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Matt, you know, I just refuse to call it X. I know people have made the switch. I'm not doing it. I'm going to stick with Twitter.
Yeah, we've been calling it X Twitter on Peacock and Williamson because it was formerly Twitter. Now, whatever.
I'm just sticking with Twitter.
Blah. Okay,
I'm gonna keep my. I'm just gonna stay in the past there, I think. But we're not staying in the past on today's show, though, Matt, because we are talking about some Dynasty trade targets. We're 7 weeks in here, and we're essentially halfway through the regular season from a fantasy football standpoint. Which I can't believe, by the way. That seems wild, but certainly at this point of the season, if you have a Dynasty contender or a pretender. Certainly, obviously, check that record, check the points scored, see where you are, really analyze your team. But if it comes down to it and you've got a Dynasty contender, it's probably time to go shopping because we've seen so many injuries. I mean, this has been the year of the injury, and there's more to come. We know that. So let's get some reinforcements right now. Matt, I was checking out Fantasy Pros. Of course, they do a great job over there, especially from a redraft standpoint. And I was looking at the strength of schedule. I really like this tool they offer. Basically, a strength of schedule for the rest of the season. They update it every week. They give a star ranking for every team and every player based on the remaining games left on their schedule. So I picked out some players based on strength of schedule that could make for quality trade targets for those contending teams. Some of these players, of course, have long-term dynasty appeal. Some are more, maybe what you would call a rental. But I want to go through those guys today. We're gonna talk certainly about the 5-star players. There are not many of them on each list, and then we'll hit a few of the 4-star players as well. Matt, let's start at the quarterback position. There is only one 5-star player at the quarterback position. Again, that's 5 stars based on remaining strength of schedule, and it's Jared Goff. Jared Goff really having one of the best seasons of his career. He does have 3 quarterback 1 games. The other 4 games he has been a quarterback 2, but pretty reliable with some decent upside as well. 4 games over 20 fantasy points. And we know the Lions, despite what we saw on Sunday at least, are playing at a very, very high level. I look forward to seeing them get David Montgomery back on the field. Hopefully they can continue to assimilate Jameson Williams into that offense. He's been hot and cold, which is probably no surprise based on what we've seen from him so far in his career. But I love Jared Goff as a trade target in dynasty leagues because while we've seen his play increase, the level of play, I don't think his price has gone up all that much. What do you think about Goff and his outlook for the rest of the season?
This is great. I mean, we haven't done this exercise to my recollection in terms of analyzing future schedule, but if he stands alone as what looks like the easiest one, and of course, somewhat subject to change, this time's out great. I mean, I know he put up stats this past week in Baltimore, but they got blown out from the start, and it was garbage time, and maybe some people were out there still very much in the camp that away Goff is no good, and there's definitely some numbers that back that up. But, boy, I trust this offense to no end. I think he's getting into that quarterback 9 through 12 in the world. And he's not just, Jimmy Garoppolo, Derek Carr type. I think he's much better than that. I have no concerns that Hendon Hooker is going to take his job a year from now or anything like that. I think he's entrenched. So I'd love this pick. Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly like it from a rest of season standpoint, but you're right. Goff has appeal beyond this season, especially in those super flex leagues. You look at the upcoming schedule: Raiders next week, at the Chargers, versus the Bears, versus the Packers. Those are 4 pretty sweet matchups over the next month for Jared Goff. So we could certainly see him put up some big time fantasy points in that coming month. Looking, kind of expanding the view a little bit here on the quarterback position, there are several players and teams who earned a 4-star ranking. Again, that's decided by rest of season, strength of schedule. Some of these are clear and obvious buys. I mean, we're talking about Patrick Mahomes. Of course, if you can get Patrick Mahomes at a reasonable rate, get him on your team. Same for Justin Herbert. I would say same for CJ Stroud at this point. But there's a lot of lesser names, guys that are probably outside of the top 20 in Dynasty quarterback rankings right now that do have a favorable schedule for the remainder of the season. So let's throw out some of those names, Matt, and I want you to pick one or two that you would go shopping for. Jimmy Garoppolo is on that list. Of course, questions about his health. Your guy Kenny Pickett is there. Zach Wilson and Mac Jones are both there. I don't know if I'm willing to go that low. Russell Wilson is there. Dak Prescott and Deshaun Watson. So a little bit of a varied group there. If you were going to add one of those guys for a potential fantasy playoff run in your dynasty league, which one would it be?
Well, real quick, I want to eliminate Watson. I want to eliminate Mac. I want to eliminate Zach. And I think I'm going to eliminate Jimmy G too, just durability. And I think that team's kind of broken as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We're on the same page.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of what they would cost, I guess Pickett or Stroud. And I don't think Pickett would be very expensive. He's not a very good fantasy quarterback. I'm not sure he's a good real quarterback. But his scramble rate is down drastically. I don't think that'll keep up. I mean, I think he's good for 20 to 30 rushing yards per game. We just haven't seen that. Deontay's back. Second half of the season's notoriously much better for Mike Tomlin. So I'm not saying he's a starter, but in Superflex, and I'm also pretty certain he'll be the starter next year. So
yeah,
Stroud's more expensive, but those are the two I like. But they're both pretty young, so they're not going to be super cheap in Superflex, of course.
Well, I think we're talking about very different markets for those two players.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, multiple tiers between Kenny Pickett and CJ Stroud right now. You can probably throw Stroud into that. Probably not the top tier that we talk about, the big 6 or 7, but he's in that next group. Maybe he's with Trevor Lawrence and players in that range. Maybe even with Herbert, Burrow, guys like that who are taking a small step back this season from what we've seen so far. So CJ Stroud is going to be super expensive. Kenny Pickett, not so much. Does not have a QB1 game yet this year. 4 games as a quarterback 2 and over 20 points just one time. But as you said, getting Deontay Johnson back on the field, the running game seems to be a little bit better.
It's okay.
Maybe that's some recency bias with how they performed this past week. But you're right. Based on what we saw last season, the second half of the season was definitely much better for Kenny Pickett and really the entire offense. That's what kind of got his value going a little bit this offseason, was the expectation that they might be able to continue that level of play. And it hasn't happened yet, but I'm not ready to slam the door on that. If I'm buying one of these guys, I mean, again, I want Stroud, I want Herbert, I want Patrick Mahomes, Brock Purdy. I would even put in that group as guys I would confidently want on my team, but are going to be more expensive. Dak Prescott, I think, is maybe the one I would take a shot on here. His value has dropped. Finally had a big game back in week 6, and then the Cowboys were on bye this past week. So we'll see if he can kind of keep that hot streak going here. He's the one I would feel safest about, and we've seen his price drop. So to me, that's a pretty good combination when we're talking about a dynasty trade target. Matt, we've talked quarterback trade targets. We have the other 3 positions left to go with some strength of schedule talk for the rest of the season. We will continue this conversation next.
Guys, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's what I've been telling you. You got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. I mean, I have a odd job, to say the least, and I wish there was something like this way back when. It would have made my life so much easier. And there's simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. So I've also told you guys about Prize Picks a lot, and frankly, I've done very well with it this year in the NFL season, and I love the setup. I love just, being able to they just give you a number, and you take, is there going to be more or less? And Prize Picks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros out there, you just pick more or less than 2 or 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. I mean, it's the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money. And you also just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on those projected stats, as I mentioned, and place your entry. It's really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in well under 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, which a lot of these things don't have, easy gameplay, an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the number 1 daily fantasy sports app. Prize Picks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. You got to check out Taco Tuesday. Every Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections all the way up to 25% to provide even more value. They also offer Apple Pay now for quick and easy deposits. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL, all one word. Use that code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100.
We're talking dynasty trade targets based on rest of season strength of schedule today. We are using Fantasy Pro strength of schedule tool and focusing on some 5-star players based on that tool. Matt, let's move over to the running back position. We have 2 5-star guys here. Feels like these 2 are going in different directions. Let's start with the positive. Isiah Pacheco is a 5-star strength of schedule player. Been really, really good, kind of under the radar good, I would say, this season. 3 RB1 games, 2 more games as a running back 2. Those are all in the past 5 weeks. So after a little bit of a slow start with less than 10 points in each of his first 2 games, Pacheco has reeled off 5 straight solid games as a fantasy starter. But again, I don't think we've seen the value spike really for Pacheco in dynasty leagues. He's maybe we're still holding that late round draft capital against him, or maybe even what we saw from Jerick McKinnon late last season. I'm not sure what it is, but I like Isiah Pacheco as a trade target here.
Yeah, I think so. And I'll admit I've been guilty of selling this guy short too. Maybe it is the not so great draft capital. I always think that there's a chance, Jonathan Taylor could have ended up there, or maybe Derrick Henry ends up there. But the chances of that happening seem very slim. It's a great line. the team as a whole is just really starting to gel. Like we were talking, power rank stuff on today's Peacock and Williamson, and I had them as the best team in the league. I mean, big shock there. I mean, Chiefs are good.
Yeah, they're back up at the top of the list. Checking out the trade finder over at DLF, Isiah Pacheco for Pat Freiermuth. That is a tight end premium league, but that's still a very reasonable trade. And that's one I'm doing. Freiermuth was not great before the injury. So I would prefer Pacheco there pretty easily. I do see Pacheco for a future first rounder. I'm not paying that price. Not giving a future first for Pacheco, but if I can package a second and a lesser player or a prospect, that's the type of deal I want to do for Isiah Pacheco. Alexander Mattison, Matt, is the other 5-star player here. We saw that exciting game on Monday night, although Mattison was not really a big piece of the offense there. Saw most of the work versus compared to Cam Akers, but that's not really saying much at this point. How confident are you in Mattison, and would you be willing to trade for him right now?
He's another one I own very little of and don't have a super high opinion of. I always thought that he was a high-end Dalvin Cook backup, but not the man, I mean, he looked good, I guess, on Monday night. And I will say their offense and team as a whole is also shaping up well. It's a very underrated offensive line. I don't think Cam Akers and those other dudes are much competition. So I guess it's fine. I mean, I'm not doing cartwheels over the player, though.
That's it. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
One game as an RB1, 4 others this year as an RB2. So 5 times already he's been a reliable fantasy starter. I think that even would be maybe a little bit surprising if you haven't been following his season closely. I think a second rounder buys Alexander Mattison in most leagues. If you're desperate for a running back, that's fine. He's just an okay player. I saw a Madison for J.K. Dobbins and a 4th round pick. I'm willing to do that. That feels like pretty much nothing, honestly.
Again. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I hate that Dobbins is nothing, but that's kind of where we are with him. So yeah, I mean, certainly between these two, I would rather be targeting Isiah Pacheco. Some other guys on the 5-star list are, I would say, obvious buys. If you can target them, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, Travis Etienne, Austin Eckler. I would even throw David Montgomery in that list. The other names there, Matt, give me one of those. Derrick Henry, Rachaad White, Ramondre Stevenson. If you're picking between those 3 to target, who's it going to be?
Stevenson. I really, really like the player. I mean, I remember having conversations probably about a year ago with you saying I thought he was the 5th, 6th best dynasty running back, something along those lines from what I recall. I know it hasn't gone his way, but I still think he's young, talented, and a very good football player.
Yeah, maybe starting to trend in the right direction.
Yeah, a little bit.
Ramondre Stevenson. Matt, we've got the pass catchers left to talk about. 3 5-star guys from the wide receiver and tight end positions. We'll talk about those guys and a few more, and we'll do that next.
So I've told you guys about Game Time often, and 2 times recently, my son and I have had to use them. He thought he was given Steelers tickets and was on the T going to the subway going downtown and realized he didn't. And I'm like, sign up for Game Time and we'll just buy them. You're already halfway there, And then the other day, not long before that, last minute, a buddy and I decided we were going to go to Guns N' Roses here in Pittsburgh. And I was like, well, hit the Game Time app and we'll be fine. So you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is fast and easy way to buy tickets for sports, as mentioned, music is mentioned, but comedy, theater, whatever you're into, with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat. That's very cool. And their best guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. There's last minute ticket deals, there's flash deals, zone deals, easy to find and buy tickets of every kind in your area. There's a lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. So they're really, they take care of things. You buy these tickets in just seconds with just 2 taps. All in price shows your total up front, so you're not getting hit with any of those hidden fees that are so often associated with ticket buying. They have deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, even an hour after it starts. Game Time is the place to find last-minute seats. I mentioned the zone deals before. You can pick the section, and Game Time picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. So how about that? Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONNFL, and $20 off right there off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Football season is here, and Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On NFL Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 2 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Host Tanitra Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Kyle Krabs will break down every game on the NFL slate to get you ready for your team's matchup, your fantasy lineups, your betting angles, and more. Plus, get the in-depth local analysis from our stable of NFL hosts across the country who know these teams better than anyone else. Find Locked On NFL Kickoff Live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Matt, let's talk about these pass catchers. 5-star ratings based on remaining strength of schedule. Drake London tops the list for the wide receiver positions. I can't decide what I think about Drake London, honestly, Matt. I mean, Obviously, we love him from a long-term prospect standpoint, still young, has the draft capital, has the pedigree, has everything. Doesn't have the head coach or the quarterback right now. He does have one wide receiver one game that was in week 6, a couple other games as a wide receiver 2, a couple other games with over double digits. But, I mean, honestly, we just expect more, especially after investing maybe a second-round startup pick on this guy this past offseason, or a top 4 or 5 rookie pick a couple years ago. And the thing is, he's not necessarily super cheap when it comes to trading for him either. So I'm torn on this one. What do you think about London?
Love the player.
Yeah.
Dislike the situation. And the head coach there is not necessarily an asset, I don't think, for fantasy, and the quarterback absolutely is not.
Yeah.
But I love the player, and I do think, I know where this is more focused on rest of year, but I would like to have him for coming years too, and I could see a better quarterback situation going forward after this year.
Well, our focus today has been on strength of schedule, but based on the inconsistency of not only London, but really the entire Falcons offense, what are we focused on here? Is a great strength of schedule, a 5-star strength of schedule for the rest of the season? Is that enough to make you feel good about these Falcons pass catchers?
Well, I don't know exactly how Fantasy Pros does this. I assume it's pass defense. It's, wide receiver scoring to this point, very fantasy oriented. But in the real world, the Falcons have the easiest schedule going forward as well.
Right.
So does that mean more running? You know what I mean? Like, are they going to be beating teams? Are they good enough that could be the case against anyone? I don't know. I'd like to have him. I don't know that he'd be my top choice for the price, but I'm a big London fan. Believer too.
Yeah, I am as well. The price is okay. 2024 first rounder seems to be the going price. I saw a Treylon Burks plus a first rounder. I saw one I would certainly do. Drake London for Brian Robinson. I would jump at that type of deal.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I'm contradicting myself. I think Drake London's worth a first rounder. I don't know if I'm using my first rounder to go get him. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I mean,
I think you should buy him for a first. I don't know if I'm going to, though.
It's kind of like, I don't want to buy a boat. I want to have a good friend that has a boat,
There you
or
go.
a pool. You take the risk, you pay the price.
Couple of tight ends that are 5-star strength of schedule players based on the rest of the season. Both of these guys coming from the NFC East, Jake Ferguson, Darren Waller. We've seen these two guys both very inconsistent this year as well. Jake Ferguson seeing a ton of targets, especially in the red zone, in the end zone. Not necessarily doing a ton with them, and Waller, we know the upside is there. We just need him to be a little more consistent. We could say that about that entire Giants offense.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I think the price for these two guys might be about the same at this point. Dynasty managers are pretty frustrated with Darren Waller. Did have a nice game on Sunday, so maybe that pushes the value back up again. Ferguson or Darren Waller, who do you want?
Waller. I'm still a believer in his talent, and we saw some flashes this past week, and maybe I'm crazy to think that the Giants offense is slightly getting better, and maybe that's Tyrod instead of Jones. But I feel like they've kind of Barkley stabilizes things a little bit. You would hope that Thomas and Michael Schmitz come back at center, and those guys in that situation gets a little better. I think it's a good time to grab Waller.
Okay. Some other cheap pass catchers to consider targeting in trade that have nice schedules for the rest of the season. Patriots, Kendrick Bourne, Devontae Parker. I don't know if I'm going that low. Nico Collins and the Texans have a nice schedule. He has certainly gained quite a bit of value this season, but maybe not as much as he deserved, honestly. Mike Evans is a nice veteran trade target. Looking over at the tight ends, Tyler Conklin, Logan Thomas, a couple of guys with a quality schedule remaining, but won't cost you too much when targeting those guys. That is going to do
real
it.
Quick. Evans and Nico to me would be pretty attractive.
Yeah, totally agree. Evans cheaper than Nico at this point.
Sure.
Maybe significantly cheaper. So
he's playing
Mike Evans, almost always one of my favorite trade targets from a contender standpoint, and that's still true this season. That's going to do it for today's show. Please make sure you download and subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Remember to follow the show at Locked On Dynasty. Follow Matt at Williamson NFL. And I'm Ryan, MC23. We'll be back next time with more Locked On Dynasty.